Hello everyone, welcome back to Future Fiber. We talk about anything related to fiber arts, but mostly knitting. Today's topic is going to be about my knitting fails. I hesitated on calling them knitting fails because fail is a strong word, right? I would call them knitting lessons, mistakes, but that's not as catchy. I have written some things down. I thought about this a little bit beforehand, so I'm not like completely going off the rails and rambling for about 45 minutes, as I usually do with anything that I film. So hopefully this will be a little bit more structured today, and maybe we'll even get some lessons out of it, some learnings, what not to do. But as I talk about it, you will also notice that I repeat a lot of these mistakes. Do as I say, not as I do, right? Oh, I should also talk about what I'm actually knitting on today, because this is a ninja, right? This is going really well. This is going swell. This is so structured, and I'm going to have so much fun editing this video because I did everything perfectly in one take. What I'm working on today is my Maude Tee. That's kind of like trying to be the Elizabeth blouse by Petiteknit. So knitting fails. The first topic that I would like to talk about is all the, we have to say a little prayer, we have to hold a little Viking funeral for all the forbidden garments that I shrunk in the wash. And I think we should probably start with the biggest fail of them all. And oh, it makes me cry thinking about it still. That was like the one time in my knitting experience where I really felt like not knitting anymore for a little bit, because it was just so tragic. It's the one time I felted and shrank my Petiteknit Sunday cardigan that was knit with Wool and the Gang. Oh, it was not Wool and the Gang, it was We Are Knitters. So background, this was when We Are Knitters was having a pop-up store in New York, and I went to their pop-up store and bought a sweater's quantity of their petite wool in the colorway Marshmallow, I believe. And I had been eyeing this yarn, you know, like I feel like a couple of years ago, like when they came out with the Yarnicorn colorway, everybody lost their minds over it, and so did I, to be honest. And I was really wavering between like getting the Marshmallow colorway or the Yarnicorn, and I like had put all this thought into it, and I got a really great discount on the yarns because they were having like a 30% off sale because of them being in the pop-up shop. And then on top of that, they also do sales for like bundles of yarn, sweater quantities of yarn. And at this point, this was like my first, I think this was like my first major expensive yarn purchase. Before that, I was knitting mostly with like, I don't even know, a lot of terrible like yarn that I got secondhand, like acrylic, scratchy acrylic. It's not even nice acrylic, but this was like, it was my first time basically spending over $50 on a sweater quantities of yarn. And it really, I was so excited. And I thought I would want to make something really, I wanted to make something special with it, right? So I was wanting to make a Sunday like petite knit. I was just starting to get into like the different knitwear designers, and I was like, oh, this petite knit Sunday cardigan would be perfect. It'd be like the perfect cardigan, my best work yet. And it really was my best work yet at that point. And I'm going to see if I can find some pictures of it done. I don't even, this is so tragic because I didn't even take a picture of it when I finished it. I was so excited to just like, you know, block it and like lay it out and then wear it. And here's where the mistake comes in. And remember, let's rewind to the point where I said all the yarns that I've worked with to this point had like at least some acrylic content in it. So I was like totally fine with just like tossing them in the washing machine. Do you see where this is going? I was like, okay, I'm going to put it on the gentle wool cycle and I will put it in a mesh bag and it'll be fine. And I'm not going to put it in the dryer. I'm just going to lay out flat. Oh my God. If you knew it like, you know, like the wool, the Petite wool, and I think Wool in the Gang yarns too, the chunky boys, that's roving, right? It's not spun, and it's very highly feltable. I didn't know that. So I put this in there and I take it out, and this sweater that was, you know, like a size that would fit me, and I even think I knit it in a large. So it was like baggy, it was pretty big, had shrunken down to the size that a 5-year-old would wear. That was a big fail. That was like, that's probably my biggest knitting fail of all time. So ever since then, I don't put anything I make in the washing machine. Yeah, I mean, it was so tragic. I still cry thinking about it. And it's like, what do you do with that at that point, right? It's felted completely down to like a very thick, dense fabric. So it's not even like, it's a size of a 5-year-old's garment, but it's not like you can even give it to a 5-year-old because it would be so heavy. I'm still so sad thinking about it. I did turn it into, before I threw it out or whatever, I did turn parts of it into like a coaster. This is what's left of that sweater. It's like the nicest coaster I have. It's also the most expensive coaster I own. Well, continuing, and you know, you'd think I would have learned my lesson here, but I did not. Do as I say, not as I do. And this goes into the 2 socks that I shrunk in the wash. Handmade socks are interesting. So I'm trying not to wash my handmade garments as often as my store-bought garments, right? That's like what you're supposed to do, especially if you're knitting and making with natural fibers. Wool has kind of like a self-cleansing or self-cleaning property, and if you air it out properly and don't let it get wet, it's not gonna smell, basically. I feel like I always want to wash all of my things like ASAP. I have this thing where I want all of the fabrics and fibers that touch my body. I'm like basically like a 16th century like medieval person, except I take showers as well. It's like you know, like the whole thing where like in the medieval times, because of the bodily humors, they thought just changing their linens every day, like all the clothes that touch their body every day, was like the way to get clean. That's like me, but I also, you know, I also shower. So I don't know where I was going with that analogy, but anyway, I have a hard time like re-wearing them, and also like hand-knit socks. I just don't, I feel kind of weird like re-wearing them. So that means it's like they're going to the wash more often. And I tried, the first sock that I knitted was knit with Cascade 220. Is it Cascade 220? I believe it's Cascade 220, but like the fingering weight, and that is not superwash. This is not something that I realized when I bought it, but you know, with socks, they make it into the washing machine. And it felted pretty much completely. I cannot wear those socks, and I'm feeling very sad about it. And then I thought I learned my lesson there, so I I was like, okay, I'm just going to buy superwash. And then I knit up the sock with a superwash yarn that I got from an Etsy seller, like a hand dyed. But I guess even when it does go into the washing machine and it's superwash, you should still worry about the temperature at which you wash these things. And also, I guess I just didn't think about how many times like the superwash sock would go into the washing machine with the aforementioned like aversion to re-wearing socks, and therefore it just felt it again at some point. And it's small, I can wear it, but it's like small on my feet, so I don't like wearing them as much. Taking proper care of your garments is very important when washing them, and that actually really did put me off sock knitting for a while as well, just like the high maintenance of these socks. But I think what I'm going to do now is to just have a separate basket for all my hand knitted socks, and then that's where they'll go so that they don't get mixed up with the other laundry and then end up in the washing machine and I lose like weeks and months of hard work. So don't do that. Don't put it in the wash. Don't do it. Just don't do it. I am a menace of my own design. Okay, let's talk about the next fail. Oh, weird yarn choice. I've made so many weird yarn choices over the years. I'm entering my 2.5-ish years of knitting, and especially in the beginning, I don't know what I was thinking, but I think I had this mindset of like, I just wanted everything to be cheap. Like I wanted affordable yarn. But I didn't even do the research correctly, right? Like this is something that you just have to learn on your own. You just have to like touch and experience the yarns in like a way that you're going to be actually wearing them for you to know how you're going to feel about it once it's knitted as a garment. So I feel like this is just part of the learning process, and I don't know what you can do to like minimize this fail if you're actually taking this as advice. So I'm sorry if I don't have any constructive criticism, but I've just made some whack yarn choices over the years. The first one, let's talk about the first one, is I knitted an Anker Tee, I think last year, or maybe it was almost like a year and a half ago. And this was knit with, going back to I wanted things to be cheap, I had bought this large lot of yarns from Ice Yarns. They ship directly from Turkey, so they're just like, they sell in like sweater quantities only basically. And I had this, I want to say it wasn't quite fingering weight. I think it's sport weight. I had like sport weight sweaters quantity basically of this wool and acrylic blend. It was like 50% wool and 50% acrylic. And you know what I decided to do with that? I decided to knit an Anker Tee. What is wrong with me? Like, what was I thinking? This was like the worst choice ever, because I mean, you know, like I don't live in a very cold climate. Like I would say New York City for the most part is like pretty temperate. Like the winters are cold, but it's not that cold. The Anker Tee, I was fully expecting to wear this like spring and then like maybe into early summer. That did not happen. It was too hot. And then the yarn was like too thick for this too, and it had really weird properties to it, where instead of it having, I feel like for a summer tee you want some sort of drape, you know, like silk or cotton or bamboo or linen. You want it to hang and then like kind of stay off of your skin. This was like, this yarn would kind of like constrict as well, and I think it had some, like, it was just also a bad mix with the design of the tee as well. You know, with the Anker Tee, it has like the rib sections that go like this. Not a look. I think I have a video of me like, or maybe it's a picture of, I have this really cursed picture of me where I'm like trying to do something. I'm not going to explain it, just but that's the only video I have of me wearing, photographic evidence of me wearing it. Just looks really bad. And I think I knit it also like too big, and it was just not it. It ended up going to Goodwill. It was just not even something that I wanted to frog and reuse the yarn for. I also made the kind of same mistake with another garment, and that is something that I'm trying to fix actively right now. It's a Maude Tee, not this one. I have another Maude Tee that I showed in my previous podcast, but it's what again? Like, it's basically I'm holding this like wool sock yarn double, and then I think it's like equivalent to DK weight. Yeah, because I'm knitting with like 4mm needles or 4.5 or something like that. And the Maude Tee, like, this is a modified version, but so it's going to have long sleeves, but then the original Maude Tee is short sleeves. What was I thinking? I did not get any use out of that, basically. I would only wear it in the winter, but it was just kind of weird because it was short sleeves. But it's heavy. It's a heavy like sweater. Just like not accounting for the seasonal properties of the yarn at all for the garment that I was making. And then kind of on the flip side of those two, I knit this balaclava. Like, a balaclava is something that you wear in the winter. And I knit it with this acrylic yarn. I think it was an acrylic yarn that it was really drapey, and it was really shiny and smooth. And the gauge that I knitted on was quite loose. So that is all to say, it did nothing for actual insulation, and the wind would just whip right through that. It was like wearing nothing, basically. And I feel like those are just kind of things that you don't know until you work and learn more about the fibers, you know? Like, you're not gonna know to not knit a summer tee with mohair if you've not worn the summer tee with mohair. Like, I feel like it's just all part of the learning process, and I guess to mitigate this, you could like you could do more research into the fiber qualities before you start on a project, but you're using that yarn because you have a certain kind of look that you want from this garment, most likely, right? And it's like, you're not going to learn it, just from my experience. I'm just very stubborn, and I wasn't going to learn any of this until I actually like did the mistake. It is a fail, but I'd like to think I failed up. Now I don't do that anymore, so I guess this is kind of related to the weird yarn choice. But then I've just made a lot of garments that gave me weird sensory like things, and I didn't know that because I was buying a lot of my yarns online. It's not really scratchy, right? I wouldn't say all of these yarns are scratchy. They're like quite soft to touch, like with your hands maybe, or even like rubbing it slightly on your neck. But then the wearing, as I said before, the wearing the garment is a completely different experience from just handling it like short term. You're not gonna know, and this is not something that somebody can tell you. And I found that out first with this, when I bought this yarn online, and I bought it because it seemed like it had like mohairish qualities, where it had this kind of, yeah, like this kind of fuzz to it, and I was trying to get that look on a budget. I knit this giant pink cardigan, and I thought I would be safe because it's a cardigan. It wasn't like really touching my neck in any sort of way. But what I didn't realize, how sensitive the inner side of your elbow is. And the way I wear a lot of cardigans is I wear like a t-shirt underneath, and then I have the long sleeve cardigan. So I guess your skin, like part of your bare skin is still touching the cardigan, and that yarn to touch didn't feel as rough, but then like putting it on your bare skin, it really felt like a scrubby, like a sponge, like a dishwashing scrubby yarn. And I don't know how that happened. It just like is, I guess it's just really something that you have to learn by touching with your hands and like feeling it in real life. Now I'm a little bit more wary about buying acrylic without kind of having the chance to like touch it in person first. And I had the same thing with a Sunday sweater. This is not the one that I shrunk. This is the one that I made with another secondhand like acrylic yarn. And once again, I bought it for the mohair qualities. But this one had another thing where it was not scratchy at all to touch. Like the first yarn, touching it, I was like, oh, this is gonna be bad. So that's why I made it into a cardigan. But this one, it didn't feel like that. It felt pretty soft. And like putting it on my neck, like rubbing it, I was like, this is fine. And then I made the sweater, and I don't think I have very sensitive, like, I don't think I have very sensitive skin, but then something about that yarn just felt really, really like irritating to my skin, in a way that it, like, I would take off the garment and then I would be like, oh, did it like leave any red marks or anything? No, it was like completely fine. It's just like a sensory thing where I couldn't deal with it. Oh my god. And kind of related to that, soft but not soft thing, I've used a lot of different mohairs at this point, and I feel like generally I don't have a weird reaction to mohair. I'm fine with putting it on my forehead. I have hats with mohair, but this Nelly Nelly sweater by Gregoria Fibers that I knitted it using cashmere from Color Mart, and then one strand of Knitting for Olive soft silk mohair and Dusty Artichoke. It seems like there might be some discrepancies in like the softness or the feeling, the tactile feeling of a fiber based on like its coloring. Maybe this color, Dusty Artichoke, that one bothers me so much more than like a different color of soft silk mohair that I've used in the past. I have a Sunday cardigan that I made from it and held with another yarn, and it doesn't make it like, I don't feel very itchy or like bothered. But the Nelly cardigan definitely makes me feel a little bit, it feels weird on my skin. So I don't know what the way around this is. Maybe it's just a combination of the cashmere that I used, which was a little bit thinner, and then so like the mohair has a little bit more room to bloom, and that's why I feel it more. I've also used like drops, kid silk, yeah, drops kid silk, and people say that the Knitting for Olive is way softer than kid silk, but I don't know, like the colors that I used with kid silk didn't really bother me on my skin, so it's a toss-up at this point. But I've just made, that's why I feel like it's definitely beneficial to go touch these things in person, and maybe like knit a swatch and then like have it on you to see if that'll bother you a lot. But maybe generally for me moving forward, I'm going to try and reduce. This is a little bit ironic considering this is like a fuzzy garment that I'm knitting, but I think I'm going to try and reduce like the amount of held together with mohair garments that I knit in the future. First of all, it's expensive, like it's eating into the cost. I just generally seem to have sensory issues with that, so you know, eh? And then I guess the next thing that I would like to talk about is not knitting things long enough. My problem, especially in the beginning, was that I'm a very impatient person. I don't know if you got that from watching any of my other videos, but I think I had a very bad habit of just like tricking myself almost into believing that I like the length of something. So I was knitting a ton of things just a little bit too short, to a point where I wasn't like, that was like the only thing that was holding me back from wearing that garment, because like the sleeve was just like this much too short, or like the body was like this much too short, where it was just like too cropped for me to wear comfortably with all of my pants. And like, I think that's just like a very beginner kind of mistake, especially if you're knitting, because this isn't even like, all of the stuff that I was am and was knitting is top down, so I could adjust the length of like the sleeve or the body like as much as I want, and I could keep going for as long as I want. And I think it was just like a combination of impatience and my lack of ability to judge how much a garment will grow. Even with making a gauge swatch, it's sometimes hard to tell how long the actual garment will grow or not grow. So what I do now to combat that is, first of all, if I catch myself trying to shorten a garment just because I feel lazy and I don't want to knit on it anymore, I put that thing down and go do something else. Because I think I'm just like feeling bored because I'm so sick of looking at the same thing. So, and I just want to wear it, right? But I know that if I cut it short here, I'm just never going to wear this. I'm not going to get the full potential out of this garment. So what I do now is just put it down, go work on something else, and then come back to it. And that usually helps me kind of get a little bit more of a reset or a little bit more energy to finish doing, knitting that bottom ribbing to 10 centimeters instead of 8 or 7 that I would have done if I didn't put it down and try to work through it. And it also gives me enough steam to kind of do the bind off that I want. Sometimes I would do like a bind off that doesn't look as nice, just because like I didn't want to put myself through doing the tubular bind off or like Italian bind off, like a sewn bind off. I generally prefer those. That's just like what I've learned over the years. And then another thing I do to kind of get a better sense of the finished garment measurements now is like, sometimes I'll like even just block, like once I do the body, or like get to a point where I feel like this is like enough in the body, but I'm not entirely sure, I will kind of either steam block it, or I will just dunk it in some water and then take it out and then leave it overnight and actually like wet block it to see how it looks. And I feel like that's helped a lot. It's just I'm getting over the whole, you know, knitting is a slow creative process and it's a slow fashion like thing, but sometimes I do really want instant gratification, and that kind of gets in my own way of making things that I will really like and wear for a long time. So like, I've already invested 3 weeks on this sweater or something, right? It's like, what's another like 3 hours to knit like a couple more rows into it, and then I will wear it instead of having wasted all this time. Let's see. And then I guess the last thing is, this is kind of related to the knitting thing short. I lose yarn chicken all the time for a multitude of reasons, right? In the beginning of my knitting journey, I just didn't have a good sense of like how much, like how far is X number of yards or meters gonna go when it's knitted up in like a garment. Like, I had no sense of like how much is a sweater quantity, how much is a scarf quantity, how much is a sock quantity. I just like had no idea, and you can't get like a physical like understanding until you actually like knit a sweater, right? In the different gauges. Like now I know that for me to comfortably kind of knit a sweater with fingering weight yarn and then like a mohair maybe, like I would need like 4 skeins of the finger weight yarn for me to make like a sweater that would fit me, and then like I don't know, probably like 4 or 5 balls of like the mohair. How would I know that if I've never knit with fingering weight yarn before? So I would lose yarn chicken all the freaking time. And this is going back to me being cheap in the beginning. I think there's a difference between being frugal and being cheap, and in this case I was definitely being cheap. I'm just not gonna wear something if I lose yarn chicken. It's just gonna cost more in the end too, right? It's like you're paying shipping again for you to acquire more quantities of this yarn to finish the garment if you just, you know, didn't. If you just bought the right quantity in the first place. And sometimes, like, you know, you buy one skein of thing and something, and you actually end up realizing that you want to make a sweater out of it instead of a hat, so you buy more of it. But that's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about me buying like I think I bought like 2 skeins of a fingering weight yarn, and then like 2 balls of mohair, and then I expected that to knit me a whole cardigan. Like, what was I thinking? I think it's easier to figure out if you have a pattern that you're thinking, right? But if you're just like buying yarn and you're like, I'm going to use it for like an X thing, but I just don't know what pattern I'm going to use it for yet, then you're getting into some hairy territory where I've definitely made that mistake too many times, where I just like start knitting with it, and then halfway through the garment I'm like, dude, I'm going to lose yarn chicken. This isn't even like a game of fair yarn chicken. Like, this is just bad maths. What's another example of like the time where I really lost yarn chicken bad? I think I bought like 1 skein of like worsted weight, and I don't know why, but I expected I could knit a Sophie shawl out of it. Like a Sophie shawl is not the Sophie scarf. The scarf is the little guy. I'm like a shawl. I was thinking I could get a shawl out of it, and I remember going into it being like, okay, well, I'm not gonna get like a whole lot of yardage out of it, or not. I'm not gonna get a lot of length out of this scarf because I only have 1 skein. But I somehow thought I could just, you know, just knit until I am at the halfway of this yarn, and then like it didn't work out, suffice to say. Yeah, and I just don't know why I thought that. I also think this is kind of related to, I just don't think I should be buying yarn if I don't have a project in mind. Like a sock yarn is different because you can always make socks with it, right? And you have like an estimated gauge of like how many socks you can get out of like 100 grams of sock yarn. But anything else, like if I'm not trying to make a hat or whatever, and I just buy something without planning just because I like the yarn, I always get into this situation where I end up having to buy more of it to knit something that I didn't even plan for initially. So I'm like buying the yarn and then trying to buy more yarn to like fit to a project, and I just think it's a very economical decision on my part to keep doing that. So that's definitely a fail. The Sophie shawl ended up being like what was I going to do with that? Unclear. I kind of had the same thing with the fingering weight hand-dyed yarn that I bought on Etsy to... Why did I buy that yarn? I think it was the same thing. It was a cat themed like yarn, and the cat in the picture had the same color. It was the same coloring as my cat, so I was just like really swayed, but I didn't buy enough of it. I bought 1 skein. But it was like 300 meters or something. That still wasn't enough to knit a whole like cardigan, you know? And I tried to knit like the Ozetta, like I think it's a field jacket. What was I thinking? Once again, like that's nowhere near. but again, it's like you would not know this unless you experience it in the flesh, sort of. So these are all beginner mistakes, rookie mistakes. That's all part of the experience, right? You can't all be perfect. You make some mistakes in the beginning. Luckily, they weren't super costly mistakes. If you are watching this and you are starting out, I think it's a little bit more different because, like, with the abundance of knitting podcasts and like material out there, I feel like a lot of people are more knowledgeable about knitting before they start now, or like maybe I'm just like making that up, but I feel like once you get to a certain depth of interest in knitting, you have access to a lot more materials that you can use to kind of improve your first time knitting experience. And I think that's really great, and I think that's, you know, like the benefit of this sort of a mini boom in the crafting circles on social media. It's just giving you a lot more information about how you can approach the craft in like a mindful and setting you up for success way that I wish I had done a little bit more research before I started, but now I'm here to tell the tale, and I'm still knitting, so, you know, take my fails as learnings, or maybe if you already have failed, and share in the comments below what knitting fails have you made and what did you learn from it, so that we can, you know, kind of learn from each other as a society. And you can feel free to laugh at all of these. It's very funny, especially the first one. I still laugh and cry every time I think about it, and I use that as like a tale, like a warning tale to everyone. Don't put your crap in the, don't put it in the washing machine. Just don't do it. Use a bucket. Be smart. Don't be like me. I hope that wasn't too rambly, but this is a knit and chat. It's not a curated list, guys. Let's see where we are with this sleeve. All right, we got some rows in. That's not that bad. Not too bad. Not too shabby. Well, thanks for knitting with me today, everybody. And as I said, share your fails in the comments below so we can all commiserate and learn. Let me know that I'm not the only person who's done all these things. I hope you have a great rest of your day, wherever you are, whatever time it is, where you are. And I will see you next time. Goodbye. When am I not playing Yarn Chickens? And I always lose.